Frank used to be a special soldier, but now he's a driver for hire. He lives in southern France and is known as the transporter because he transports things for a living. One day, Frank is hired to take 3 guys from a private bank to a location. Turns out, the guys are actually bank robbers, but Frank doesn't care as long as he gets paid. He follows 3 rules: never change the deal, never ask for names, and never open packages. The robbers want Frank to take them and their loot, but there's a problem. There are 4 of them, and the deal was for 3. The leader threatens Frank with a gun, but Frank sticks to the deal. The leader kills one of his own guys and kicks him out of the car just as the cops are getting close. Frank finally can show what he's capable of. His reaction time, calm attitude, and perfectly planned route manage cops look like fools while driving like there is no tomorrow. One of the robbers feels sick and Frank asks him to take some fresh air since the leather seats have been conditioned recently. They continue their drive and everything is according to the plan, but they get trapped when a garbage truck blocks their way. Not a big deal for Frank since he makes a burnout and manages to escape by jumping on the back of a trailer. At the destination, Frank receives more money than agreed and is asked to drive them to Avignon, but Frank refuses on the basis of the first rule. Instead, he goes back home, cleans his car, and changes the license plates. He's always prepared with fake plates for his job. He changes the license plate number and heads home. While at home, he hears news about the robbers being caught due to their bad driving on the way to Avignon. A local police inspector, Tarconi, visits Frank to ask about his car, as a black BMW with a license plate containing 0 and 6 was used as the getaway car. Frank, having changed his plates, has no idea about it. Tarconi finds nothing suspicious and leaves to check other possible cars. Frank got a call from a potential customer who required his help that night. Frank met the man and agreed to have him deliver a 50-pound package to Darren Betancourt, an American. The man agreed to pay Frank $40,000 up front. When Frank requested it, the box was placed inside Frank's trunk. The next day, as Frank is driving to the destination with the loaded bag, he has to stop to fix a flat tire. While opening the trunk, he discovers he's transporting a person but takes no action, changes the tire, and continues on his way. Breaking his 3rd rule, Frank opens the package and discovers a Chinese woman inside, chained and gagged. Offering her a drink, Frank continues his journey. However, the woman starts knocking on the car trunk in the middle of the road. After removing her gag, she informs Frank of her need to urinate. Feeling sympathy, Frank assists the woman out of the trunk for a bathroom break. Unexpectedly, the woman, named Lai, attempts to escape, prompting Frank to quickly intervene and bring her back. Ready to return to the car, Frank is spotted by 2 police officers. In response, Frank is forced to incapacitate the officers and place them in the trunk alongside Lai, who has passed out. After a long ride, Frank finally arrived at his destination and delivered the promised package to Betancourt. When questioned by Betancourt about the package's contents, Frank, also known as Leiden, insisted he hadn't opened it. As Frank was about to head home, Betancourt offered him another job, involving delivering a bag in the same direction as his return trip. Frank agreed and made a quick stop along the route to grab some food and refreshments for the officers in his trunk. Tragically, the officers in Frank's trunk lost their lives when his car unexpectedly exploded just as he was about to get back in. It turns out a bomb, intended to eliminate Frank, was concealed in the briefcase provided by Betancourt, aiming to keep Frank silent about the shipment he was transporting. Filled with anger, Frank decides to seek revenge. Frank returns to Betancourt's house, where he confronts and deals with several of Betancourt's henchmen, causing harm to some and fatally injuring others. During his escape, Frank takes one of the vehicles parked there, only to discover Lai bound and gagged in the back seat. In an unusual move, Frank places Lai, still tied up and gagged, in the middle of the street. However, he quickly has a change of heart and returns to pick her up, feeling sympathy for her situation. After providing Lai with food and a place to stay for the night, Frank instructs her to leave the next day. When Frank goes to bed, Lai is left to depart on her own. That evening, Lai secretly goes through Frank's belongings and uncovers that he is a highly skilled former Air Force soldier. Realizing that Frank is a decent person, she investigates to find out who attacked his home. In response to the assault on his home, Betancourt goes to the hospital to visit one of his surviving men. Discovering that Frank was behind the attack, Betancourt takes matters into his own hands and eliminates his own men to prevent the police from linking them to his criminal activities. The following morning, Tarconi, a law enforcement officer, arrives at Frank's home while Lai is preparing breakfast. Tarconi suspects Frank is responsible for the bodies of 2 police officers found in his trunk and the nearby burning car. Frank explained that he had been in the area the previous day and his car was stolen while he was there. Tarconi, skeptical of his story, questioned Frank again. Suddenly, Lai, introducing herself as a chef and Frank's new girlfriend, appeared and vouched for Frank, supporting his account. Despite the support from Lai, Tarconi, unable to find any evidence linking Frank to the car incident, eventually departed from Frank's residence. As soon as Tarconi left, Frank angrily instructed her to leave both the house and his life. Then, however, Betancourt and his soldiers started firing indiscriminately on Frank's house. Shortly after Frank immediately rescued Leon, took her to safety. Then Betancourt ordered his soldiers to fire missiles at Frank and Lei's homes in an effort to destroy them. Both Frank and Lai barely escaped when the missiles were fired at them. After reaching the underwater channel where Frank had set up his diving gear in case of emergency, they swam to the closest safe house. The following day, Inspector Tarconi summons Frank and Lai to the police station so they can speak with him about what happened to Frank's house. Tarconi questions Frank about his interactions with the person who set his home on fire and their motives. Frank argues that he was swimming in the ocean with Lai when the incident took place, so he was ignorant of the perpetrator. Once more, Tarconi wasn't entirely convinced by Frank's claims when he informed her. Tarconi urgently informed Frank that the police commissioner needed to see him immediately, leading to the premature end of their interview. While Coney was away from his desk, Lai accessed his computer to gather information about Betancourt, which she later shared with Frank. Due to a lack of evidence, Tarconi was compelled to release both Frank and Lai from the police station. Believing Frank to be dead, Betancourt, seeking to end the dangerous situation, advises Lai to follow suit and start anew. He suggests rebuilding his villa and life, away from the dangers connected to Betancourt. Lai then reveals to Frank that Betancourt is involved in human trafficking, holding 400 Chinese people, including her father and siblings, captive in shipping containers for the purpose of selling them into slavery. Touched by Lai's plight, Frank is determined to help her rescue her family. Frank and Lai make their way to Betancourt's office, where Lai locates the paperwork related to the container holding the 400 Chinese individuals, including her family. As Frank attacked Betancourt and pointed a rifle at him, then Betancourt informs Frank that Kwai, Lai's father, is Betancourt's business partner and is also involved in human trafficking. Frank thought I had tricked him. Instead, when quiet as thugs showed up, Lai pointed a gun at her father. She was finally intimidated enough to give in to her father's demand that she lay down her weapon. Betancourt tells Frank that there are only 395 Chinese in the container after Kwai's goons have defeated him. On the other side, Tarconi learns about Betancourt from his computer, which displays information on the man, and rushes to his office where she finds Frank asleep. Frank detailed everything to Draconian, explaining the involvement of Betancourt and Lai's father in holding hundreds of Chinese individuals in containers for an impending human trafficking trade. Tarconi, convinced of the urgency, chose to aid Frank in escaping from prison. Adopting the guise of a fake hostage, Tarconi released Frank, recognizing that he could solve the case more swiftly than the police without being constrained by a search warrant. With everything in place, Frank trailed Betancourt and his crew to the Marseille docks, where they intended to load the containers onto trucks that evening. Despite Frank's careful preparations, he was discovered, leading to an unavoidable shootout between Frank and Betancourt's henchmen. Frank encounters difficulties while attempting to board the truck to stop it, and Betancourt's men successfully incapacitate him. Subsequently, Frank finds himself facing Betancourt's most formidable fighter, a challenging opponent, along with a group of thugs armed with sharp weapons led by Quizcoons. Despite the formidable odds, Frank uses all his fighting skills to eventually overcome them. However, Betancourt, undeterred, deploys more armed men, compelling Frank to escape by throwing himself into the sea. Once ashore, Frank seizes an old vehicle and endeavors to pursue the truck carrying the container. Unfortunately, the aging vehicle breaks down on a secluded country road. Exhausted, Frank spots a small aircraft heading towards a farm and, determined, continues his pursuit after it. Frank, armed with a rifle, instructs the pilot to fly him close to a truck carrying containers on the freeway. Using a parachute, he lands on top of one of the vehicles. Once in proximity, Frank knocks out the truck driver. Betancourt, attempting to intervene, and 3 of his henchmen meet their demise as Frank throws them out of the moving truck during a prolonged and intense struggle. Regaining control of the vehicle, Frank tows the cargo truck to safety. However, just as he is about to exit, Kwai pulls a gun on him, intending to kill Frank to conceal his crimes. Furious that his daughter had defied him and sided with those who would become slaves, Kwai even orders the killing of Lai. In a reluctant act, Lai shoots and kills her father, saving Frank. Inspector Tarconi and the police arrive later. hurrying to rescue the people confined within the containers. They praise Frank for his courageous efforts in the rescue mission.